Good morning. Thank you for coming. I know it's a terrible week for a lot of us. It's such a challenge just to wake up sometimes. I was joking with my friend Susan that having someone this Sunday who wrote her political science dissertation on the separation of church and state is a bit like getting an epidemiologist to preach during the first wave of COVID. What are the odds? And yet, here we are. But instead of beginning with a discourse on the law, being mindful that this is a church service and not a political debating society, I want to begin with a story about a turtle. Have you ever watched a turtle who got turned on his back? When I was young and newly married, we lived in an apartment that didn't allow pets, so I bought a turtle. We named him Yertle, and Yertle the turtle was an escape artist. Sometimes I'd go to clean his little habitat and he'd be gone. We'd look high and low for this tiny little box turtle that we'd bought for about $2 in 1974, and often I'd find him in a corner on his back. He'd gotten himself flipped over, and his 4 little reptilian feet would be pumping back and forth a mile a minute. Now, Yertle the turtle had been programmed by evolution to do this. If you wiggle your limbs hard enough and fast enough, you can turn yourself back and put your feet on the ground and make it to safety. But while you're on your back, you're sending a message to predators: here's lunch, come and get it. When Yertle the turtle was on his back, it's safe to say he was experiencing toxic stress. Have any of you felt recently like a turtle on its back? Finding it hard to get into the spirit of celebrating the 4th of July this year? You are not alone, my fellow turtles. Now, to speak about another animal, I want to buy a thunder shirt. Have you seen the ads for thunder shirts? These ads run the week before July 4th. A thunder shirt is a special doggy coat. It's designed to be snug, to comfort nervous dogs. Have you ever watched a dog have a bad reaction to fireworks? They need their thunder shirt. So this week I wanted to order one for myself. I wanted to order one for myself, for my daughter, and a lot of my friends. And we've been through unprecedented craziness, even before COVID and even before now. 2 impeachments, each time with the Senate failing to convict, an entire political party captured by conspiracy theories of Italian satellites, changing votes on our voting machines, cyber ninjas in search of bamboo on our ballots. As crazy as this has all been, it's been an extra heaping helping of crazy here in Arizona. And we thought we'd get back to normal. But in terms of democracy, we are far from back to normal. A congressional inquiry into the insurrection brings more evidence every day that had there not been some courageous people at the Department of Justice, we might have lost our democracy after the 2020 elections. If on January 6th, Mike Pence had chosen to get in a car in the basement of the Capitol and drive away from danger, or if the rabid crowd had been able to reach him, we might have lost our democracy then and there. We've had political conflict our whole history, but never a conflict over facts like this. If you've ever tried to talk to a friend or a relative who believes the election was stolen, you know exactly what I mean. Happy 4th of July. However, there are some Americans who are celebrating. They have worked hard to change American law And this week they did it. For the first time in our history, the Supreme Court took away a right that had been affirmed and reaffirmed as a constitutional right for over 50 years. And we don't force people to give blood transfusions to save a life or to give an extra kidney to someone who needs it, but now, thanks to the Supreme Court, about half the states, including Arizona, will force women to give birth because their rights aren't as important as the rights of a potential human being. Women with money to travel may keep the right to their own bodies, but poor women, and disproportionately women of color, may be trapped like a turtle on its back. But because this is a church and not a political discussion group, I'm going to focus on a particular threat to democracy that I see in the Dobbs ruling. I want to focus on separation of church and state, and how to keep religious liberals, Jews, atheists, agnostics, pagans, and non-believers from becoming second-class citizens in their own country. See, my spidey sense about constitutional law detected something very, very fishy in the Dobbs decision. The new majority on the Supreme Court, they did not rule that abortion should be banned. They didn't. They did not rule that abortion is murder. They didn't. They did not rule that a developing fetus has a quote-unquote right to life. They didn't. They merely ruled that the rights of the woman carrying a fetus cannot be found in the plain language of the Constitution. They did not rule that abortion was murder or that a fetus is a person, because if they did, they would be relying solely on religious beliefs. And that's not supposed to be what makes law in the United States. The 5 most conservative justices punted this decision to the states, knowing full well that the states with a majority of conservative Catholics and conservative Protestants will ban abortion based entirely on religious beliefs. This violates the separation of church and state. I don't view the Dobbs case as an argument about the right to privacy. I view it as a very clever bait and switch to allow the states to do what the Supreme Court cannot: rule based solely on a religious view held by some of its citizens. As the writer Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, has observed, quote, "That which is a sin within a certain set of religious beliefs is to be made a crime for all," unquote. Here's another quote. "Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Even though I wrote my dissertation so long ago I used an electric typewriter, I still know the First Amendment religion clauses by heart. The result of the Dobbs decision may mean that we will have an establishment of religion in some states and not others. A favored religion with all other religions in the back of the religion bus. This is profoundly un-American. After the Civil War, we decided as a nation that certain rights could not be taken away by majorities within individual states because some rights were too precious to be up for grabs. These are the rights in our Bill of Rights. And right up there in the First Amendment is the separation of church and state. The 2 clauses work together. An established religion, a favored religion, is contrary to religious freedom, to religious liberty. And if America stands for anything, it stands for religious liberty, freedom to practice any and all religions or no religion, without the government putting its finger on the scale for one religion over another. But now, One religion's view on the so-called right to life can become law in a state. Is it likely to end there, with half our states outlawing abortion and half protecting the right to choose? Not if you take the religious so-called pro-life movement at their word. Because if abortion is murder, friends, it's always murder. It's murder if the pregnancy is the result of rape, incest, or other forms of coercion. It's murder if the pregnant person is 10 years old. It's still murder. And why, if you sincerely believe that abortion is murder, would you be content to allow murder galore to take place in New York, California, Illinois, or Connecticut? The road is clear. They will not stop. Their religion tells them they cannot stop until they have made abortion illegal in the entire United States. Indeed, the ink was not dry on the Dobbs decision before Mike Pence declared his new goal for the forced birth movement. Abortion should be illegal everywhere, made illegal by federal law. Not because there's no right to privacy in the Constitution, but because his religion says a fetus is life from the moment of conception, and all abortion is murder. His religion. In this way, I argue that the Supreme Court has made straight the path for Christian nationalism. The notion that the whole United States should be governed by so-called Christian principles. And by Christian, they mean conservative Catholic and evangelical Christian principles. In the fevered imaginations of these Christian nationalists, the government exists to serve religion, their religion. Christian nationalists proclaim that Trump was sent by God. They hold rallies starring clergy and disgraced General Mike Flynn or the My Pillow guy, where their Christian hymns blare from speakers as they exhort their followers to follow God by following Trump. God and guns are somehow part of this toxic stew. In this way, the forced birth movement slips easily into the siren song of theocracy. Speaking of siren songs, this next hymn, which we will sing in the middle of my homily, I'll come back afterwards for a few more words. This next hymn's original title was Once to Every Man and Nation. It's based on a poem called The Present Crisis. The poem was written by a 19th century Unitarian, James Russell Lowell, son of a minister, a Harvard Law School graduate, and an abolitionist. He wrote his poem, The Present Crisis, to protest the Mexican War. We don't talk about the Mexican War much, but it was about the expansion of slavery. The Mexican government considered Texas to be in rebellion because the Texans continued to own slaves after the Mexican government abolished slavery. So President Polk invaded Mexico under the doctrine of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny. This was the belief that the United States government was chosen by God to govern from sea to shining sea, even if we had to go to war to do it. History doesn't repeat itself, but it has some glorious rhymes. singing. What a beautiful song. What a beautiful song. It's a stirring hymn, isn't it? Religion has a place in motivating people to oppose evil. In fact, that's why many of us are Unitarians. We believe that is the purpose of religion, not just belief, but action. But what happens if this tips over into the extreme position of eroding the separation of church and state, making the government just another arm of a church? Watch this video taken recently in a church as Congressperson Lauren Boebert of Colorado, a darling of the MAGA movement, makes her case.
The reason we had so many overreaching regulations in our nation is because the church complied. The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
Well, that was frightening. But although we may feel as if the wind has been knocked out of us like a turtle on its back, in need of a thunder shirt, we can and must find our footing. A friend of mine who was the senior minister at Old South Church in Boston used to say that faith faces forward. Faith faces forward. And if there ever was a time for this to be real, it's right now. We must have faith in each other and in leaders of goodwill to do what needs to be done to get this right. Our own Unitarian faith and long tradition of protests and advocacy can be our metaphorical thunder shirts, wrapping us up, bucking us up, giving us courage for the living of these days. Because we have a job now. We have to build that wall or rebuild that wall between church and state. Now, there were many mistakes made in the writing of our Constitution, but they got some things right in the Bill of Rights. The separation of church and state is the crown jewel of our American legal tradition. There are literally pages of quotations from Jefferson, Madison, Adams, and others of our founders stating that they were most proud of separating church and state. I had to catalog all of those things for my doctoral dissertation by hand on my tiny little note cards, but I won't bother you with them today. I'll just send them to Lauren Boebert. The point remains, they got it right. Religion is about matters that are beyond compromise, not subject to logical discussion, and therefore unsuited for running a country. The old order Amish believe God demands that no one use electricity, but they don't come to take away our appliances. Orthodox Jews don't mix meat with dairy, but they don't come for our cheeseburgers. I do not demand that Governor Ducey accept my religion, but I will also not bow to his. Now, this might cheer us up, fellow turtles. Some rabbis are fighting back. Rabbis! Rabbi and practicing attorney Barry Silver is filing a lawsuit to stop abortion from being banned in Florida. As reported in the Miami Herald, quote, Judaism is in conflict with this law. Rabbi Barry Silver of Congregational Ador Vador said in an interview, explaining that Judaism supports abortions if necessary to protect the health and well-being of the mother. Quote, We'd have to choose between practicing Judaism and this law. And if we go with Judaism, we risk criminal prosecution. I, as a rabbi, if I counsel someone to have an abortion, I can be tossed into jail, unquote. So I say, we should saddle up and ride with the rabbis. In 2019, then UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray wrote this, quote, abortion bans are a completely inappropriate overreach of the government into an individual's First Amendment right to live by their own religious convictions. We do not live in a theocracy, and my faith calls me to fight to keep it that way. So can we celebrate this 4th of July? Sure we can. Sure we can. Let's celebrate what our independence bequeathed us, the separation of church and state, the legacy worth fighting for, the legacy of a secular government. And then I suggest we take action. First, I suggest we saddle up and ride with the rabbis. Let's join them in their lawsuit. I want the Unitarian Universalist denomination to sue the hell out of every red state that wants to impose their religion on us. Meanwhile, we all get up and go to work through the ballot box or by adding language to our own state constitutions. And when we do this, when we saddle up, we will once again feel our power as citizens instead of feeling like turtles on their backs. In closing, let me say that there are petitions available to put on the ballot here in Arizona an amendment to the state constitution to protect reproductive rights. If you'd like to sign one, see me. I brought some just in case. Blessed be.